Welcome to the High Agency Podcast with your host, Noah Ravoy. Hello, everyone. Today is a special topic, and I don't have a guest for today's topic. I actually wanted to talk to you directly about a very important subject, and that is the question of, do women have agency? Sounds kind of like a funny question, and definitely it's something partially controversial. It's something that people are going to have strong opinions of. And let's start out by talking about why it is such an important topic. This is really the question of the age. You know, in the last 100 years, women have had unprecedented amounts of power in society. Women have always had power in the sense that they were valued as wives and as mothers and as grandmothers. But now they're also the largest block of voters, and they control about 80% of consumer purchasing. And more than ever, they've had almost sole contact in early childhood with most children. So, you know, we live in a society that was mostly raised by women. And this means that women's decisions have had a massive impact on modern society. And the status of their agency is therefore extremely important to the future of our civilization. But before we can answer the question of, do women have agency, we need to describe what agency is. Agency means that we take personal responsibility for ourselves. It means that we also develop the skills necessary to fulfill that responsibility. So we need to learn to control our instincts, our emotions, our thoughts, and our actions. Agency is really the primary trait that separates humans from other animals, and it's what makes us unique. Able to direct our lives and our civilizations is what makes things like markets and science and philosophy and even love possible. And because of this, it's a really important topic. In practical terms, agency is all about our ability to make good choices consistently. And by good, I mean choices that are likely to lead to biological success, to reproduction, to happiness, and not necessarily only at the individual level, but at the societal level. There will always be some people that choose not to have children. However, they'll still reproduce in other ways by producing things of value, science, art, things that society needs in order for it at large to continue to grow. Another way to say this is that if you make consistently good choices, you're probably going to have a good and very long life. And if you consistently make bad choices, you're probably going to have a bad and maybe very short life. Most of us, however, we make a mix of good and bad choices. We have partial agency. And because of that, we get mixed results. Historically, situations of intense competitive pressure, either between individuals or between societies, suffering and sacrifice that goes along with that, these all required a high level of agency in order to survive, and they were what we call eugenic. So things even like war and famines and plagues tended to kill low agency men and any women who relied on them for survival. However, sometimes women whose men did not demonstrate sufficient agency could find a new tribe, new men, and then partially escape the consequences of bad decisions. And that's going to factor into what we discuss later. By asking, do women have agency, we're really asking the wrong question. The question itself is flawed because it views agency as a binary. You have it or you don't have it. But the reality is it exists on a spectrum with a normal distribution, and it probably follows what's called the Pareto principle. That means there's a clustering around the middle, and that the who has a lot of it has a ton, and who has very little has none, almost. And so there's this kind of distribution. If it helps, you can think of agency being distributed in a trait-like form, such as we see with IQ. You know, there's a lot of questions we can ponder involving women and IQ, but no one's going to say, do women have IQ or do women have intelligence? It's an absurd question. And it's about as absurd as asking, do women have agency? Individual women can be placed on an agency bell curve. Like all human traits, agency is going to, of course, be unevenly distributed. Most women, I suspect, are roughly distributed around average with a tight cluster to the mean. In the best quintile of women, they're going to have be very small and have far more agency than the middle quintile, which will be quite larger. And then they in turn will have far more agency than the bottom quintile, which will also be very small. This is good to understand trends, but it doesn't tell us a lot about the specific agency of an individual woman or how agency relates to them. To do that, we must go deeper. What questions should we be asking if do women have agency is a bad question? It's interesting. The first question I want to talk about is, what is the difference between male and female agency? And please note that I say male and female. This is because some people display agency that's more associated with the opposite sex. In other words, there's men who think like women and women who think like men. And when I say male and female agency, I'm describing how the singular trait of agency is generally expressed by each group. Male agency is penetrative, hard, leading, protective, and boundary setting. And it helps men to perform their functions as providers, protectors, and presiders. Whereas female agency is more receptive, soft, discerning, comforting, and nurturing. It helps women to perform their functions as wives, mothers, and caretakers to the weak. The difference between these two expressions of agency are due to the differences inherent in the biology or the nature of men and women. We're each suited to a different set of tasks because we have natural strengths and weaknesses. And a huge part of knowing our agency is understanding and working within our limitations. So then, can women demonstrate the masculine form of agency? Yes, they can, but at a cost. It's going to negatively impact their femininity and their fertility. It's going to cause tremendous emotional and hormonal stress. That's why it affects their fertility and their femininity so much. And it will reduce their attractiveness to a man who could provide the masculine agency they need in their lives. Additionally, women are never going to be as good as a man at being a man. They're never going to be able to demonstrate the masculine functions to the same level that a man can do it. It doesn't matter how much they develop their agency, they're simply limited in those areas. However, when male agency is lacking and society becomes very dangerous, both women and children are left unprotected. And this forces many women out of necessity and notably against their preferences to become more masculine and take on normally male roles to protect themselves. And this really isn't a good situation for anyone. We as a society should not be forcing either sex to function outside of their natural roles. Another good question to ask is, what affects a woman's ability to exercise her agency? Now, what I'm writing here, we're going to use woman and her in this, but it also applies to men. There are 7 limitations that affect agency. There's a knowledge limitation, so that's ignorance. If there's things you don't know, you'll be limited. Intellectual limitation, that is your intelligence. Mindfulness limitation, that is our ability to control our impulses. There are physical limitations, that is limitations that are inherent in our body. Instrumental limitations, so what technology we have available. Resource limitations, that is our wealth. And then impediments placed upon us by others. So a basic working practical knowledge of philosophy, politics, and politics is really just how humans are organized and how they work together. A knowledge of human psychology and science, especially female biology, and a woman's understanding of her own inner self, the self-knowledge, is essential for a woman to demonstrate agency in her life. And ignorance of these things reduces her ability to pilot her life in a healthy direction or even to follow the leadings of those with greater agency. Displaying agency requires many choices to be made. Therefore, intelligence plays a massive role in a woman's ability to demonstrate agency. If she's incapable of understanding certain issues or questions she's facing, or to be able to define the difference between true and false information or guidance, how can she then demonstrate a high level of agency? This factor alone reduces much of the Earth's population to near zero levels of agency. a fact that is well recognized in laws that do not hold the mentally incompetent accountable for their actions in the same way that we hold the rest of the population. We're also all born with very little impulse control. And as we mature, we should be exercising our abilities to control ourselves and regularly improving. Even as adults, we can dramatically improve our ability to control our impulses by using techniques such as meditation, bioneural feedback, and other types of training. Still, there's going to be some limitations to our progress in this area, just due to genetics and possibly structural issues and damages that might be caused by drugs or childhood trauma. This impulsive behavior, though, it actually makes when we train for mindfulness, it reduces the impulsive behavior in ways that can actually be measured scientifically. So we see changes in the brain. In our brain, there is a lot of impulses competing for attention, and we have the ability to decide which ones get the primary attention and get action and allow us to actually act in the world. And as we learn to control that, we end up with a much healthier and better life. Another thing that limits our ability to demonstrate agency is illness, severe disability, old age. These types of limitations that are physical, that are in our body, they're going to affect our mind, our mood, and our energy levels, making it harder or easier to demonstrate agency. European peasants, my ancestors, living in the Middle Ages, they died often from what we now call easily preventable diseases, mostly waterborne pathogens. Now, these people weren't being reckless or foolish. They simply lacked the technology to protect themselves, and they did the best that they could with what they had. As we've developed better technology to keep ourselves healthy and safe, we've learned to have control over ourselves in the world, which is agency, in ways that we didn't even imagine in the past. If you're poor, and in extreme cases, if you're actually starving to death, it's virtually impossible to demonstrate agency. Humans in severe deprivation, fear or distress or anxiety tend to revert to animal-like thinking. They're just desperately trying to survive. And in that case, well, you might need agency more than ever. Most people simply can't muster it up. On the other hand, we may have limitations imposed by others upon us. So a slave, for example, has sufficiently reduced agency, as does a political prisoner or someone living under oppressive regime. Powerful governmental and societal pressures that change incentives can also alter the amount and ways that most people are going to use their agency. So for an example of that, you can see the welfare state and how it's undermined various groups of people, turning them each generation into a higher and higher percentage of low agency individuals. Alternately, a strong and generally benevolent set of social pressures, which are positive, can actually reduce a woman's need to demonstrate agency. And that enables lower agency women to successfully pass on their genes. So whether it's really good or whether it's really bad, it can have almost the same effect in some cases. Now, women have always historically suffered less than men when they didn't show agency. We always held men to a higher standard of agency than women. And this is because even if the entire tribe was wiped out, all the men died, the surviving women would almost certainly be accepted by the new tribe of men, and they could continue to survive that way. This wasn't available for men. It was very, very rare that men could switch tribes, could join a new tribe if theirs was conquered. Usually they ended up being a slave without the right to reproduce. So then, how much agency does the average woman have? Since we can't say how much agency do women have, since they have different amounts, let's just group them into below average, average, and then above average. And this is going to help us to understand what kind of a woman, each woman might be able to understand what kind of a woman she is, where she might fit into this. Now, when we're talking about average and when we're going through this list, there are some women who will fall outside of the spectrum for one reason or another. And this is because, usually because they're involved with, some sort of pursuit that's outside of the normal. So they're artists, or perhaps they're religious women who have joined the church or whatnot. So they're going to be a little bit outside of this. We're going to focus on the 80-90% of people that have what you might call a typical life. So the average woman, how much agency does she have? Well, think about it like this. Everything about women, the physicality, the psychology, it's all structured around helping them to be successful mothers. Therefore, we should expect an average woman to possess the optimal amount of energy to maximize her fertility and care for her children. But there's a big problem with that. For humans, all of our optimal levels were set during the thousands of years we lived in this fairly simple, primitive existence where women had very few choices and there were always strong men around to help them. In addition, until recently, in Western society in particular, we had a very patriarchal culture that was protecting women and reducing the negative choices that they could be confronted with. In 2021, currently women, they're going to have to make decisions that our ancestors never imagined. And this kind of lifestyle and political choices that they face, they're actually unprecedented in human history, even for a majority of men. So we talk about women for about 100 years having the vote, but it was only a few years before that the vast majority of men didn't vote. So we're really treading in new water right now. What's the result of that? Well, for the last 100 years, insecure women have been voting for bigger and bigger governments, delegating their agency away to the state in exchange for a promise of provision and protection. So they're hoping to get masculine agency back from the state. On the other hand, married women who have masculine high agency husbands tend to prefer to rely on their men for provision and protection. And then they vote for smaller government that's less likely to tax their husbands. So we see that average women may simply not be evolved to deal with the modern challenges that we're currently facing. And, there's other results we're seeing from that as well. Women are more depressed than ever. They're using a large amount of psychotropic drugs. There's, statistics that say 2/3 of women are on drugs that alter their mind. And many women are also on birth control because they feel unable to have children in the present conditions, or they don't trust their spouse enough, or they don't have the money to have children, or they're stuck in school debt. So women are faced with a whole bunch of negative consequences that just weren't an issue in the past. Many women are also very uncomfortable with expressing their agency to its maximum potential. Frankly, most women don't want to be faced with a myriad of daily decisions. Most women crave masculine leadership, guidance, and protection from fathers, husbands, and a patriarchal society. And they want to be able to focus on the things they want to focus on. That's often their feminine need, their feminine pursuits, but it's also can be other things that they enjoy pursuing. They want to forget about the dark and dangerous world out there. They don't want to be confronted with it constantly. We see women who are addicted to news and social media very often having particularly serious problems with anxiety and depression. I don't think we should be faulting women for this, and we shouldn't hold it against them. They're just instinctively protecting their femininity, their ability to be agreeable, soft, sweet, and gentle with their husbands and babies. So what's the conclusion from this? Well, the average woman has enough agency to follow the lead of a strong and assertive man, to protect her fertility, to raise small children, and care for a house. And that's simply not enough to address all the needs that women are facing in modern society, especially if these women are young and lack the guidance from their fathers or a protective community. So that was average women. How much agency should we expect from great women? No human's going to demonstrate perfect agency. Not any man or any woman. And all the people, though, who tend to watch my videos are usually above average. So they're usually interested in how do above average or, people in the top third, how do they deal with things? Well, if you're a woman and you're in the top third, Historically, the women in the aristocracy, they took on a lot of responsibility. The women at the top of society, and they had to care for the estates of their husbands when they were out at war. So we know that women are capable of demonstrating a lot of agency while still maintaining their femininity. And what would that look like in the case of an above average or a great woman? So it'd be everything we mentioned earlier. And in addition, she takes personal responsibility for her actions. She sets tasks and goals for herself and then accomplishes them. She's on time most of the time. No one's always on time. She chooses only virtuous people to be in her life. She sets boundaries for herself and then she holds to them. She's capable of managing her money. At a minimum, she has no crippling debt. She's capable of managing her own health, her mental and physical health. She doesn't have major vices. She makes mostly positive decisions, and she is regularly seeking to improve her ability to have agency. She understands her own limitations because she has sufficient self-knowledge to understand her virtues, her motivations, her strengths, and her weaknesses. And she believes that morality is objective and rational, and that's even if it comes from a divine source. If it's not, it doesn't have to be objectivism. It doesn't have to be that source. But if she understands that it's moral objectivity is a thing, it means that she's going to have a lot higher agency. A good question that we can ask as well is, how do we judge a specific woman's ability to exercise her agency? So women, how do you know how well you've been exercising your agency? Well, Jesus says you'll know them by their fruits in Matthew. And that's basically how we can tell anyone's level of agency. What are the results they're getting? What is their life like? What is the outcome of their choices? Is their life generally improving, or is it degrading? Are they becoming better people, or are they getting worse? And we can ask the question, how do we express ourselves and how do we talk about our lives? So if a woman is expressing herself in a way that demonstrates a bitter victim mentality when confronted with opportunities to display agency, we know that this is probably not her forte. On the other hand, if she takes personal responsibility easily and readily in conversation, then you know that she is working on her agency. How do they deal with events that are out of their control? So how do women deal with events out of their control that they don't have, things that are happening in the world, in politics? In not confronting these things is a legitimate strategy for women. It is not women's responsibility to bring order to the chaos in the world. And if they choose to simply pull themselves out of that, that's a perfectly legitimate strategy for women. Do they attempt to make the best of their situation, or do they surrender when confronted with difficulty and give up their agency? And here's one of the most important ones. Do they promote realistic levels of agency in others, including their husband and children, or do they look for excuses? And that includes excuses for other people. How can someone, a man or a woman, increase their agency? Well, of the 7 elements of agency, we can improve at least 5 of them: knowledge, mindfulness, physical limitations, resource limitations, and impediments created by others. We can work on our knowledge limitations by studying philosophy, psychology, and learning directly from others who have demonstrated agency. And very importantly, we can learn from our past experiences. Keep taking in that knowledge and growing. We can also improve our mindfulness by practicing impulse control. Every time that we control an impulse, our ability to control impulses gets stronger. It's very much like exercising a muscle. We have to repeatedly control ourselves until it becomes easier to do. Learning meditation techniques that strengthen the brain's ability to self-regulate can really speed that process up. So physical limitations can be improved by eating in a way that supports our health, exercising to get stronger, fitter, and healthier, and other things that maximize our ability to have the energy necessary to pursue our responsibilities in the world. Resource limitations. Well, we can escape poverty and dependence on people or systems that diminish our agency. That's going to be very different for different individuals, but that is one way that we can improve our agency. And of course, impediments placed upon us by others. Eliminate people from your life who are making you weak. Cut them out of your life. Don't think about them anymore. These people will hold you down and prevent you from continuing to develop your agency. And it's interesting that sometimes the people holding us back are no longer even alive, but it's the memory of them and it is the trauma that they caused to us that holds us back from growing in the future. Instead, make friends with people who are going to set healthy boundaries and good examples and demonstrate agency to us so it's easier for us to continue to develop our agency. Now, all of these areas are addressed specifically in my course on agency, and you'll be able to see the link to that in the notes below this video. How can you help your loved ones to exercise agency? So if you're a woman and you want to help other women, or if you're perhaps you want to help your wife to have more agency, or you're a woman and you want to help your children have more agency, how can you do that? Well, you have to lead by example, first of all. You have to demonstrate a certain level of mastery and agency of your own. This requires you to be deliberate as well in explaining why you make certain choices and what lessons those around you can take from them. Teach the skills that people need to develop their own agency and expect them to be the best that they can be. Having high expectations for those in our lives, even not beyond what is possible for them, but expecting them to be their very best, is a huge improvement to training their agency. Many people do not develop their agency because they simply don't recognize they have the capacity to. And so those expectations go a long way to changing people's expectations for themselves. Historically, agency was developed through suffering and exposure to risk. We understood if we didn't plant seed at the beginning of the harvest season, at the end, we wouldn't have anything to eat and we'd die of starvation. So we had suffering in the future if we didn't demonstrate agency in the present. We have to allow those who we want to develop agency to be exposed to reasonable risks and to feel consequences for bad decisions. This is extremely important for them to connect their current decisions to their future situation, which is a huge part of having the skills of agency. Of course, you can also help the individual to have access to professional agency training or a coach or a mentor if they wish. How will a woman's level of agency affect her relationships? A woman with below average agency will require a lot of hand-holding and micromanagement. She'll need a lot of help to choose good friends and a marriage partner, and she's going to be very frustrating and expensive to keep her as a wife, because she's going to tend to make a lot of bad decisions that are going to cost you and your children in the end. A woman of average agency, and this is the vast majority of women, they'll make a great wife and a great mother, provided that they have a husband and they're willing to be submissive to him and to his leadership, and assuming that he knows actually how to be a leader as well. And a woman of above average agency, well, now you're getting into some interesting territory. She's going to be a major financial and lifestyle asset to her family and community. She's going to be able to help manage the money either she makes or her husband makes with great prudence. Her ability to spot dangers to the family and make good decisions about diverse topics such as who to trust, family diet, how to network with other members of the community. All of these things are going to strengthen her family and improve their reputation in the community. With the right training, most women can move from either below average to average or from average to above average. And the return on investment for that effort that a woman puts into improving her agency are tremendous. There is an issue, though, with above average agency women. They're going to require a husband who has a lot of skill in leading them. We have to be careful not to crush the spirit of these high agency women by removing their decision-making opportunities from them or treating them like a child. Let them have their own realms of responsibilities where they're the mistress and where they get to make the decisions. This is extremely important because otherwise she's going to turn her agency towards getting that kind of freedom. Generally, higher our agency, the more that we crave freedom. And that's no different for women than it is for men. And so higher agency women, they actually function better when they have a large amount of freedom. Really, though, we can't expect more of people than they're capable of giving. And not all humans have sufficient agency to be awarded the right of full self-determination. Whether it's due to low intelligence or ignorance or personality flaws, a large portion of people are simply unable or unwilling to consistently make good decisions. And we need to learn how to quickly identify and avoid such people. Most women do not have sufficient agency to vote responsibly or even to choose a spouse without the support of a mature patriarchal structure to guide her decisions and prevent crafty and manipulative men from preying on her. Most women also have the sufficient agency to be good wives and mothers, provided they have some level of outside structure that imposes healthy boundaries and limits their options to the healthy ones. But the real danger lies with women and men who both refuse to exercise agency while at the same time not following any form of healthy structure. These type of people are destroying society, and when it's women, they're creating the meme that women have no agency. So then, how do we answer this question? Do women have agency? In very simple ways. Yes, women have agency. Some have more agency than others. It's a spectrum. And we should avoid those who have no agency and lack the humility to follow the lead of those who do. Now, I know that I have some questions here. I'm going to take a look at the comments. And I think I have some questions actually that were on YouTube. So we're going to get into the questions and answer part. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. Let me see here. Yeah, this is going to questions. Okay. So one of the questions I got earlier was, oh, it disappeared. Huh. My early questions have appeared to disappear. Yes. Okay. So I had some questions earlier about what happens to women who have very high agency, and how do they find it, or how do they find a man in which they can submit to? Well, they're going to have to find a man of higher agency than them. Otherwise, it's not going to make sense for them to follow the lead of their husband if they're better at making decisions than him. Now, even though that might be the best way to have a happy marriage, it's going to be difficult for those high agency women married to a low agency man. And for men, if you're in that situation, you need to up your agency. Women are naturally hypergamous. Now, there's a lot of mistakes made in what hypergamy is. A lot of people feel that it's a compulsion for women, and the below average agency women may become compelled. They may work under a compulsion to constantly try to trade up. But for most women, they have enough agency to recognize that once they've made a long-term commitment, that they improve, or they exercise their hypergamy by inspiring their husband to improve into the best man he can be. Now, that's what women can do if their husband is not as high agency as them. They can help him to become the best man he can be, inspire him. And simply by their example of demonstrating agency, they can help him to demonstrate more agency as well. And if there's any more questions, I'm open now to listen to any questions. Make them in anywhere on the social media below the video, and they'll pop up for me here in StreamYard. Okay, good. Looks like I've answered all of the basic questions with the information that I went over. And feel free to message me in the future as well if you have questions about this topic. We're about to launch a course very, very soon, and we only have a couple openings left for women to teach them agency using a very proven method that I've used to teach men and women agency. And it's a 12-week program. You get together with us with a group of women once a week for 90 minutes, and you go through the material. And there are actual exercises you can do which help you to train your agency and to level up. You can level up from a low agency woman to a medium or even to a high agency woman if that's your potential. Good. We have another question here. Okay. Yes, I absolutely think that a woman can do this if the man has the capacity. And the reason is that most men are operating so far below their true capacity that it's shocking. And I've seen that because after men go through training, how much they change in just a few weeks. That's another thing. If women want to help their husbands, they could, let them see some of my information about agency, and maybe he will want to take a course on it. The way that she'll influence him, as I mentioned, is by demonstrating her agency. And most men, good men, they do want to impress their wives. They want to impress their women. They want to keep their women happy. And one of the greatest things that a man can do for that is to make her feel safe and secure and protected. That's hard to do if you have low agency and can barely take care of yourself. So as a man, learning to improve your agency is going to really do a wonderful improvement in your relationship. A lot of times men are training their agency and we'll say they're becoming more mature. And that's often a colloquial way to describe the development of agency. Women crave mature men. Women do not want immature men. And what they're really looking at is the higher agency that these mature men display. But yes, she can absolutely help him to do that. And he can end up higher than her. In fact, I would say that part of being a high agency woman is being attracted to men who have high potential for agency. In an ideal world, we would all be living up to our potential. And since so many of us aren't, women tend to be attracted to men's potential, and men tend to be attracted to who the woman actually currently is. This goes along with the idea that women want to change men and men want women to stay the same. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that attitude as long as the change the woman wants to make is through influence and through inspiration rather than directing and leading the man. Now, that will upset the dynamic and reverse the polarity of the relationship. Excellent. So feel free to comment below in the future, and I'll try to answer in text if anyone comments on the YouTube videos below. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. It's been an excellent session. And I'm going to try to do more of these where I go over a topic in depth, and probably also provide some article as well at the end where you can read it as well. Thank you for joining us, and have a great evening. Thank you for watching our video, and I hope it inspired you to take action in your life. Please subscribe to our channel and like this video to get more agency building content. The real secret sauce is in our newsletter. Click on the link in the video description below to sign up. I promise I won't flood your inbox, and anything that we do send you will be of high value.